Very warm welcome, everybody. Lovely to have you here. Nice to see some people back from last week. And just to say that next week we've got our two registrars, James and Kevin, who are going to talk to us around some of the legal matters to do with churches. We look forward to that. But tonight we've got Pat Forero. I hope I pronounced your surname correctly, Pat. It's very nice to have you here. Pat is a sole practitioner architect working on churches in our diocese. She's going to talk about maintenance issues and project issues. And we're very grateful to you, Pat, for giving up of your evening and time and expertise to be with us. So thank you. Now we need a screen share. So Pat, if you want to put up the slides, I'll just speak to the first couple and then I'll hand over to you if that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah. There we are. There we are. I hope you could all see that. Can you wave at me if you can see it? Can you just do that? If you can see it, then I know that's great. That's great. Yeah, you can see it. That's lovely. Thank you. So first slide, second slide, please, Pat, if I may. So just to say, some of you know this, but this is I think the third in our present series. We've done a number of these sets of four over the last couple of years, dealing with issues around church wardens, buildings, and maintenance. And I did parochial visitations last week. As I say, we've got legal issues next week, and we've got Pat tonight talking to us about maintenance. So you'll find all of these recorded and on the Insight Hub if you wish to go back to them. We will also be sending out to you the slides from this evening, and again, you can be able to access those on the hub. Pat, would you mind doing the next one, please?
I think that's all what I have.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, that's great. That's great. No, well, then in that case, Pat, it's over to you, and thank you very much for being with us.
Okay. Thank you. Right. I think before I start, I just want to kind of second guess why you all attended this webinar. And I believe you might have a few questions that you might want to sort of find out an answer this evening. So I'm just going to put up a few questions, and then if you don't mind just writing on the chat box the number of the question that you have in mind, if you have any of these, 1, 2, or all 5 of them. So I have questions that have been asked by church wardens in different churches. And I think you might have one of these that you would like to sort of address this evening. So if you don't mind just putting it in the chat box, if it's 1 or 2 or 3 or all 5 of them, that would be very helpful. Thank you. And hopefully I should be able to see the chat box.
No idea where it is.
So if you all go down, there is a little icon that says chat.
Oh, yes.
That seems to be working. People are filling it in. That's great. Thank you.
So far, 3 and 4. And then 2, 3, and 4. Number 3, we're happy to have info on all 5. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. So just going back to the actual slide. Okay, so basically, yes, so we have these 5 questions. Most of you have said questions 3 and 4, and maybe 5. And so, yes, so this evening I'm going to be talking about maintenance work, but above all, the importance of engaging appropriate contractors for the work. So as Archdeacon David said, so I'm Patricia Forero, accredited conservation architect. I've been working with churches for for a long time now. Been practicing as a conservation architect for 20 years or so. And then because I've been inspecting architects for several churches as well. So I think I tend to have the same questions over and over again when I go to my quinquennial inspections. So I just thought that perhaps this will be useful to all of you. And I don't want to sound patronizing because I know most of you have been doing this for years and years. But I think sometimes it just it's good to have a little reminder of the things to look for when you are doing the maintenance, but also when you are engaging contractors to do the work in your buildings. So yeah, so as you all know, small tasks can become big tasks if you don't handle them in time. And minor neglected maintenance tasks can become really expensive if you don't do it, at the right time. And things like, in this slide, is vegetation, is debris, is also things happening that could have been done, not necessarily by a contractor, but maybe by trained volunteers. So not everything obviously needs a contractor. There are many things that can be done on a daily basis or on a routine basis by the volunteers. But then, oh, just give me 1 second. So then we also have other actions that need managing, and like is overgrown vegetation. And that is one of the main issues when I'm looking at historic buildings and when I'm looking at churches. Ivy growing on the walls, or usually you have yew trees growing very close to the buildings, to the boundary walls, etc. But then all those things can be managed, and if you manage them all in time, then obviously that's preventative maintenance, and that's vital. I suppose by now you all must be thinking, well, yes, of course we know all of this. We know that we need to maintain the grounds. We know that we need to maintain the buildings. But I think the real challenge is really finding the resources. So it's finding the time, the money, and just focusing on really maintaining, but not maintaining as reactive task, but as a proactive task. That's the main thing. And to me, really is the whole point is about planning. So the solution is just to plan ahead, to allocate the time and the budget effectively. And the best place to begin is to implement a planned preventative maintenance program. And with that, you can have, if you have a 10-year management and maintenance program, with those sort of forms, it's just a simple, form in Word or by hand or in Excel or whatever program you want to use. But if you divide those tasks in monthly and then, every 3 months or every six months or every year or every 3 years, 5 years, up to 10 years, then that will make life easier for all of you, because you will know exactly when things are coming or what time of the year you need to be doing what. Also, if you add, hopefully you can see my mouse, but if you add a column about the costs, then you can start adding that information in there. So what is going to happen is that at the end, you're going to have a table similar to this, where you will know exactly how much you're spending year by year. And that helps you, obviously, to budget the maintenance work, the costs. And you will also say, for example, if in year 5, you know that you need to redecorate the walls or you need to do a big maintenance task, then you know and you prepare during the previous years because you know that that expense is coming. The same for year 10. And then basically what I want you to understand is just that it is a tool for you to understand how much you're actually spending every month and every year. And then with time, it will set up like a baseline, if you like, to carry on doing those works. And then you will know, so if in year 1, it costs you an X amount of money to do, I don't know, clearance of the gutters, and then in year 2 is increasing, and then year 3 is increasing. So you know roughly how much is increasing year by year as well. But then the one thing is that not all churches need a very big chunky maintenance plan, because some churches are bigger, some churches are smaller, some have flint, some have bricks, some have tiles, some have lead, etc. So the good place to start to actually put together the maintenance plan and to know what sort of tasks you actually require is with your quinquennial inspection report. So the quinquennial, I know for a fact that for some churches, it just becomes just a report, and then they receive the report, they read it, maybe they discuss it, and then they just put it away. For some, when it is looking a little bit concerning because they have a lot of priority one, then they start looking for means or, for the funding to do the work. But what is happening as well is that some church wardens believe that with the whatever is in the report, with that they can just go out to a contractor and ask the contractor to provide a cost to do the work. And I'm sure you have all seen this disclaimer at the front of your reports where it says that this is a general report only, not a specification, and must not be used to execute any work. If necessary, the architect is willing to draw up the specification and carry out all work necessary to assist the PCC in applying for the essential faculty and direct the execution of repairs. So this is quite important because I know contractors who are very experienced contractors that come to me and say, look, we cannot really go out and provide costs to PCCs based on, a little paragraph of the quinquennial report, because there is not enough information. And for us, there will be a lot of guesswork. And as you know, when contractors are guessing, then what happens? So either they put the prices up because they don't know, they are covering their backs, or they put the price too low because they don't know exactly what actually entitles. The end result is that you always end up with a cost that is not really what they quoted in the beginning. So it is more. So you are spending more. And then there is no real management because the contractor is just doing whatever they believe is right. And the PCC doesn't really have a guidance on how to do the works or how to specify the works or what materials to use. So I think really, to me, it's just about having a strong relationship with your quinquennial architect or surveyor, because really that's a working relationship. And again, I also know a fact from different PCCs that they avoid to go to their architect or to their surveyor because they think that they're going to be charging for every single piece of advice. I don't really think that is necessarily the case. And I think many architects like myself that work as inspecting architects, well, we are working with churches because really we like them and because we understand the importance of those churches, not as a building or as a historic building, but also for the congregation and the local community. So I'm pretty sure that more people are quite happy to take on a phone call, and then you can ask them and say, look, we're trying to do this. What do you think? What shall we do? Where should we start? And then they can also advise if you actually really need an architect or no. You might not need the surveyor, you might not need the architect. You might just be able to go directly to the contractor. So in terms of actually going to the contractor and trying to understand, to separate which one is good, which one is bad, I think contractors come in all sizes, and not all contractors are good for everything. Our local smaller contractor might be sufficient for small tasks like, cleaning gutters or fixing a tap, etc. But when it comes to more substantial work involving the historic fabric of your building, you need to engage contractors with the experience, with the right experience in your type of building. And unfortunately, I have seen two common scenarios. So the unfortunate one is when an inexperienced contractor wins the job because it's low cost and they offer a cheaper quote. And what this might seem like a good idea initially, I will say 9 out of 10 times the work will need to be redone because it's not up to standard. But then if you go on the side of the experienced constructor and you engage them without any proper guidance either, then the problem is going to be the same. Yes, they might know what they're doing, but because they don't have any guidance, sometimes those contractors also need the guidance of the architect or the surveyor. So it is very important that you understand the scale of the project and who is actually required in that project. And there will always be good and bad contractors, experienced and inexperienced contractors. But I think as a rule of thumb, if you can, please avoid contractors who ask to be paid in cash only. The ones that do everything themselves. So the ones that they say to you, oh, yes, of course we can do the plumbing. Of course we do groundworks. Yeah, I also have a cousin that does the brickwork. And I have a friend that is a decorator. And yes, we can do this and we can do, and they can do everything. So, avoid them. And then also the ones that are very difficult to get hold of. So they are the ones that, they come to work one day, the next day you don't know if they're actually going to turn up or not. Then they come back the following week and then they say that they were on holidays and they never complete the works. So that lack of consistency as well is not good. When they provide a vague quotation, so it's a quotation that you ask them to do something specific and the quotation just comes in with just one line and a price. And you go ahead with that quotation. And obviously, when you go ahead with something so vague, it's very difficult to pinpoint and then to go back to the contractor and say, well, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. Because he might say, well, it's not there. I never quoted for that. So it is additional and an additional fee for that. Also, the ones that only go to the local merchant's warehouse to buy the materials. So the ones that don't bother going and procuring the correct materials, the ones that are really relaxed about health and safety on site, the ones who don't understand traditional materials or how buildings decay, and obviously the ones that have messy construction sites. So of course, not all of these you will know from talking to the contractor the first time around. That's why it's so important that the network that you have as church wardens is important at that point, because you can talk to each other and ask, do you know this contractor? Have they worked for you before? Or just ask around and ask who has worked in other church similar to yours and who has had a good experience with them. Now, the other thing is also, I kind of came up with this sort of silly formula, and it's about, inexperienced contractors plus the lack of expert guidance equals wasted materials and wasted money. And in these 3 photographs is just examples of a few churches that I have inspected. And with these ones, the issue have been contractors that probably know what they were doing and they were very well intended, but they didn't really understand how materials decay. And so in this first photograph is in a church in Suffolk. And behind this, I don't know if you can see, there is a flint wall. And somebody, I don't know when, the church wardens didn't know when either. But I believe probably in the 80s or the 90s, I don't know. Somebody decided that because there was damp inside, so then they had to render all the walls. They rendered all the walls externally with hard cement mortars and internally with hard cement mortars. And then obviously the flint wall was still very damp inside. The panels, the render panels, they were not attached to the flint wall, so there was water going in behind. Now the cracks started to appear, and then somebody came around and said, well, they have hard cement mortar, they shouldn't do that. So he applied lime mortar to fix the cracks. Now in this case, obviously you would have thought, well, yes, obviously they use lime mortar, that's what they should be using. In this case, it shouldn't be what they use because they already had hard cement mortar. And the hard cement mortar with the lime mortar don't work together. So the lime mortar is flexible, the hard cement mortar isn't. So what is happening is that they had cracks all over again. Every single crack that they tried to repoint was all open, all over the place. So that didn't work. So that's a waste of time and a waste of money. Then in this Victorian tile floor in another church in Essex, so they had the issue of some damp in the floor. But then when they repaired the floor, so the contractors repaired the floor and they repointed again with hard cement mortar. The ground was very hard cement. And then you cannot see it here, but there was a red carpet on top of this. But because there was a little bit of unlevel surface, the contractors thought it was a good idea to put some grout just to level that area under the carpet. So they put this grout, which again was cementitious. What happened was that all the damp was actually going through the hardboard, which you can see here is all moldy, and then this got stuck to the floor. So again, another example of, yes, probably trying to do their best, but they didn't. And then this last one is the one that is the most common one in all buildings, and especially wherever we have flint. And in this building, they redecorated the walls. It was looking beautiful many years ago. But then what happens is that they are using acrylic base paint. And you might know acrylic base paint is basically like if you put cling film on the walls, it retains all the damp inside the wall. And then what is happening is that all that damp is retaining there. And what you can see here, all these blisters, is just the water there because it's not a breathable paint. So that creates more problems. And again, they spent a lot of money redecorating this church. And now it has to be done all over again. That acrylic base paint needs to be removed and then leave the plaster to breathe and then reapply a breathable paint. So in these cases, the right materials were used in some of them. The wrong materials were also used. But the result was just not wasting money, but also ongoing damage that could have been avoided with the right experience. So you really need to ask yourself at that point, well, was it really cheaper? Did we actually achieve anything with that? So that takes me back to, again, please just get on the phone and talk to your architect or the surveyor. And I cannot really emphasize that enough. The inspector is the only person who knows the building as well as you do. And it doesn't mean that you have to use an architect or a surveyor every single time you need a job in the building. But they can still be the person advising you on how to proceed with the smaller jobs that probably don't require their involvement. But they can advise you on the best approach for the repairs, what sort of materials to use. They might also suggest what sort of contractor to use, or if they know somebody locally that can help with that work. And then also they can give you advice, into how to do the work correctly. So not only they can produce a schedule of works or the specifications, or they can tender the works for you or help you with the tender, and also look giving you advice on that tender, on the cost that we've received from the different contractors, and appoint the contractor. But the whole thing is that what I would like you to understand that this is not about giving work to the architect. This is about preserving your building and making the most of the money that you have for that building, because I know it's not enough. It's never enough to maintain the building. But if you do it correctly, in a small bits, it will last longer. And obviously, with your maintenance plan in place, you know exactly how much you're actually spending. I will help you to budget. So if you're dealing with a larger project, because not all projects are small, sometimes you have larger projects, then is when you need to tender for the work. And obviously, it is essential that the tenders that you receive are comparable. Because if they are not comparable, it's like, comparing apples with pears. How do you know if it's actually one is a good price or not? So for this to happen, you need a set of specifications and outlining the detailed requirements of the work and where it needs to be done, what sort of materials to be used, and without the intention is that the contractors don't make any assumptions with the work, because when they start assuming is when the provisional sums appear, or very high or very low quotes, and then the likelihood is that it will increase the cost of the project at some point. And you want to avoid that. at all costs. So be sure to ask the contractors to provide information about how they plan to carry out the work, which is their methodology. And this is particularly important depending on the scope and complexity of the project. So say, for example, working in a church in the countryside is very different from working on a church in a busy town center. Because in a busy town center, you need to take into account construction traffic, for example. And also make sure that you talk to them or they provide information about the health and safety records, because again, you don't want a contractor who is a health and safety problem and on site. And then in a larger project, we tend to use standard contracts like the ones produced by the Joint Contract Tribunal. But if it's a smaller project and you are not using a standard construction contract, I will say that at the very least, you need to have a signed quotation, even if it's not a specific contract, but at least a signed quotation, where you have specified with the contractor a commencement and a completion date, a value of the contract with a guarantee. What is the guarantee that the contractor is giving you of the work, or agree on a percentage of the retention of the value of the contract. And what that means is in the JCT contracts, you have a 5% retention. What that means is that they complete the works, and throughout the time of the project, there is a retention of 5% of whatever is being paid every month to that contractor. That means at the end of the construction period, you retain those 5%, and then, you retain the 5%, then when the contractor reach practical completion, which means when you are actually given the building back to use, then the contractor gets 2.5% of that retention. And then the other 2.5% retention, you keep it until the rectification period finishes. Usually it's about 12 months. Sometimes it can be 3 months, but it is usually 12 months. What that means is that at the end of those 12 months, the rectification period, whoever is administering the contract comes and have a look, checks for any defects. The contractor comes and rectifies the defects. And then when everything is sorted, then you release that 2.5%. So you have a little bit of a guarantee that the contractor is just not going to disappear and leaving you with defects all over the building. Then the other thing that is quite important, that you have a description of the work contracted. So as I said earlier, it's not just about just one line saying, I'm cleaning the gutters. Now, it really needs to say, I'm cleaning the gutters, I'm cleaning the gullies, I'm looking at the downpipes, I'm rolling this, I'm doing that. All of that needs to be really detailed, because they might quote for one thing, and then if they want to be really difficult, they might come back to you and say, oh, well, we never talked about the gullies. So that means I'm going to charge you more for that. And then you end up in a pickle because you don't have a compact basically on that. The other thing is about materials to be used. So again, obviously it's not the same to use cast iron than to use UPVC, or to use oak, to use softwood. So materials to be used is quite important that goes in there. Agreed lines of communication, how you're going to communicate with the contractor, because there is nothing more important than have everything written. Whatever you agree, whatever he says, whatever you say, everything is written. So agree lines of communication. If it's going to be by email, then just do it on an email. If it's going to be by telephone, do it on telephone, but record that on a piece of paper as soon as you hang up. And then make sure that the contractor knows that you're actually recording all of this. And then, very important, make sure that you have insurance in place and the contractor has insurance in place, and obviously health and safety management. And I think with all this, it's not just a protection for you, but it's also protection for the contractor, because you are in a relationship where you are the employer and they are the contractor engaged to do the work. So you need to make sure that both parties are in agreement of what the works are entitled, how long they're going to take, how much it's going to cost, etc. So you all know where you are all basically on the same page, and that avoids misunderstandings later on. And then just to finish, really, just remember that being a builder does not mean someone can do everything. And while most contractors have the best intentions, they might not always have the right knowledge or expertise for every job. So I will say just be inquisitive with anyone you approach for work on your church building. Ask the right questions, seek their qualifications, understand their experience with similar projects. And above all, health and safety legislation applies to church buildings, as you all know. And the PCC is responsible for compliance with this. Obviously, the contractor is responsible for their own health and safety, but you are also responsible for them to actually following suit and following their health and safety policies. And I'm not going to enter into basically health and safety issues here because that's a completely different webinar. But it's just to make sure that, when you look at these examples and these photographs, is how builders, they might have the best intentions, but they really don't understand what they're doing. And you end up with patch repairs like these ones, or these ones, which is actually having water going behind the render, or patch repairs like this one, which is a mix of lime mortars and hard cement mortars. And everything is detached anyway, because it's flint and the wall is damp. So the person who was doing this wasn't really understanding the decay of these walls and these buttresses. So yes, basically, the one thing that I want to leave with you is just that every time you engage anyone to do any work in your building, just make sure that that person, that company has the right expertise. It's not a company who is promising to do absolutely everything for you, unless they can really demonstrate that they are really a principal contractor with experience, with expertise, and they can bring in other trades. But the ones that are just like, one or two people running the whole show, I would try to avoid that. And I think that's it. I hope you found this useful. These are my contact details if you have any questions after this. But so I'm just open to questions now.
Thank you, Pat, very much indeed. Pat, could you stop sharing the screen just so I can see my folk and I can see if anybody's got any questions. Thank you.
Stop now?
There you go.
Oh, why is it stopping?
I don't know. That's a good question. Hold on a second.
Oh.
Do you want to put a hand up? Or?
Can you let's see
Stop now? Yeah.
There we are. Excellent.
Yes,
Right.
sorry.
Not at all. Not at all. So before you ask your question, just remember to unmute yourself, please. I think the easiest way to do this is if you use a little yellow hand, just to say, yeah, I'd like to ask a question. If you can't manage a little yellow hand, just stick your own hand up, no matter what color it is, and we'll get to you. So Charles, off you go. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Unmute.
There you are, Charles. You're there.
Sorry, I can't find the button along the bottom.
No, that's right.
Thanks very much for the talk, Pat. I actually found most of that obvious. What I think, where you got into the details, there were some interesting examples. Don't apply particularly to us. What I would find useful is if the forms and the various suggestions for completion and links to the building regulations were put on the Insight website or sent out generally. Probably not that easy, just but put it on the Insight website so we can individually access the various documents and things you mentioned. The second point
we will do that, Charles. They'll be on the hub, and you'll also be sent the slides as well. So,
thank you. Yes, I expected you would be, but I just want to make a point. The second point is, I'm having a problem at the moment. We have funding, we have a plan, we had everything to go ahead, but our contractor has gone off the line off the planet, as far as I can make out. So, and that is we're going to deal with that with the rector on the 9th of December. So we've got a plan for that. What would be useful, however, and it may not be what you want to do, but where there's been successful works done, architects and the contractors put on a website or a list. It would be good if the ones that would had a problem, but of course you can't do that nowadays because everyone's going to sue you like mad. But it would be good if you could put where you've had successful things done, because in various areas there might be people we don't know. We have been around the various churches. We are in communication with the various church wardens, but where the diocese has a complete list of successful applications and successful works, it would be nice to know.
Yeah, no, again, Edmund is able to tell you which, where we've had satisfactory completion. We have to be careful about not being partisan, as you say, Charles, but Edmund does have that information, so he can give it to you. Yeah.
Right. Yes, we're using the diocese architect, Philip Orchard. He knows. The problem we have at the moment is that we have employed, or we have made works connections with one local chap who apparently can do it, but seems to have gone offline. So we're suddenly run into a problem.
Sure.
But it would be nice to find out who in the area has been successful.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Philip can find that out for you from Edmund.
Yeah, right.
Richard, you're next, I think.
Yeah, following on from what Charles was saying, really, we find it very difficult to find suitable contractors to do some of the work we're looking to have done. Excuse me. I've got some fairly hefty electrical work to be done in the church. I've had 2 contractors come out 2 months ago. I'm still waiting for their quotes to come in. I keep chasing them, but they seem to be very reluctant now they've seen the size of the job to actually want to undertake it. I just wondered if it is going to be possible for the diocese to publish a list of contractors, not recommendations, because we understand the implications of all that, but just a list of contractors who have been successfully used in other places. Because I find it incredibly difficult to find suitable contractors to undertake the work we've got to be done.
Richard, sorry, may I ask what sort of work you're quoting for, you're tendering for?
We're looking to install infrared heaters in the church. Well, the infrared heaters you can buy off the shelf basically, but they're not installed. You have to have somebody there install the electrical supply to them. And that is to install. The second thing we're trying to do is solar panels on the roof. And again, we've had 2 or 3 contractors come and have a look, but they've sort of walked away. Cable runs and everything else are too difficult for them to achieve. It's so different from being in a domestic situation.
Yeah. Do you have specifications for what you're looking for, or they are just coming to say whatever they believe is the best solution?
We have a proposal in place of what we want to achieve, and we're asking their advice on how to achieve it in many respects. Solar panels mounting on the roof is fairly straightforward. The cable runs, it comes back to electrical work again. They seem to shy away from it. It's just in the too difficult box.
Right, yeah, because in my experience, what I've found is some contractors, they just walk away sometimes because they don't really want to think. They just want to have everything written for them in a specification. They just want, if they need to run cables, they want a drawing where they know where the cables are going to go. They don't want to think of any of that. So but for some of them, because they're so busy, they just prefer just to walk away or to come back with a very high quotation. So you will say no. Yeah. Basically.
So we have experienced that. If we're just struggling to find a contractor.
Again, Richard, I think I'd say
building works, electrical works, plumbing works, or whatever.
Yeah, I think Richard, if you contact Edmund,
use that straight away.
Edmund, can you hear me, Richard?
Yes.
Yeah, I think if you can't, as I said in the previous question, I think if you contact Evan, he may be able to help you, but it's really hard getting contractors at the moment because there are just so many construction jobs on. We do struggle to find contractors. We do, unfortunately.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Karen, you're next, I think. Karen Pringle.
Hello, just a very quick question. Is there a recommended minimum level of public liability insurance we should be looking for?
Is the question for me or for
Anybody who can give me the answer?
There's a paper. There's a very good paper on the website about insurance. It's just gone up, giving you advice about how much to insure for. You do need.
When we're looking at contractors' insurance is what I'm talking about.
Oh, I see. So, okay, right.
The level of public liability insurance they should hold.
Ah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, usually I ask them for at least 5 million.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Thanks, Karen. Sorry. Charles, you're back again. Is it brief? Then I'll come to Alfred. I can't, Charles, you need to unmute. I think I'll come to Alfred. Alfred, please do answer your question while Charles is sorting out his.
The question I've got is, we are in sort of the unenviable position, or whichever, very lucky for the architect who did our quinquennial report retired recently, leaving us in a position where we did find another architect who would take it on, but they're not familiar with it and have it, and there's a learning curve to that. And when we're trying to work through that, is there any thoughts or advice towards that situation? We have found somebody to take the place, but it is, they're obviously not familiar with the building completely and all the rest of it. But, when there are questions, how do you handle a situation like that?
So so what I understand is basically you're not really sort of very confident about the new architect understanding your building?
Essentially, I guess the gist of it, I don't want to put words in their mouth because I can't, but the gist of it essentially came out to be, I'm not as familiar with your building, and until I can actually do a quinquennial, I'm not totally comfortable with answering some of the questions. I'll answer them the best I can if I have time. And I understand the time issue too, because they're obviously very busy like everyone else is. But, when it comes to the very things you're talking about, it makes it difficult on our part to, when do we talk to them? Who do we talk to about this? What do we do? Because we're still 2 years away from when we will have our next quinquennial report.
And is this new architect, well, are we talking about a historic building in your case?
Yeah, our church, the historic building, yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose the questions for your new architect before you appointed him or her were in terms of, her experience, or is it a man or
There
a
was no
woman?
question about experience. They were already working doing work on quinquennials for other buildings and other churches.
Right, okay.
They came well recommended. It's just, how much do we expect if we deal in a situation like that? How much do we expect, or how do we expect to deal with them in that situation when it comes to asking and getting information? Because obviously we want to be fair to them, but we also, there's questions on our side.
Giving advice. Yeah, exactly. I can only speak for myself and for my experience with my churches. And if I take on a church, it's because I usually have the experience of that sort of church, that sort of construction. Because obviously, if you are looking at a timber frame building, it's quite different from a flint building or a brick or whatever that is. But I think if you're a new architect, yes, he's new to the church. Obviously, he hasn't had the chance to have a look properly because he didn't do the quinquennial. But I would have expect that being the inspecting architect appointed by the PCC, he will have at least, a little bit of knowledge of the sort of building that you're talking about. And if you ask a question, I don't know what sort of building you have, but say if you're talking about a medieval flint building, and you're asking questions about damp in the walls, and I'm expecting that person to at least say to you something in the lines of, how damp behaves in flint walls,
Right.
and what you could do. Or if it's about the roof, or if it's about, I don't know, tiles or lead work, or, they should have a general knowledge, at least, of the materials and the pathology and how they behave and how they decay, to give you some sort of advice, because it's not just that, well, because I haven't done the quinquennial, then I don't know. I think it's a little bit too sort of vague.
Well, it was probably
I'm gonna have to
different in that I can't speak to the words exactly, but the general feel that I got, at least speaking with the primary warden, I handle the building side of the stuff, so I'm more secondary to it, but was that, at this point in time was he's there, but only for those things that we really need. And I'm like, okay, we'll do our best. But I just am trying to figure out what you do if you find yourself in that position of going forward.
Alfred, I think I'm going to have to move on because there are other people who want to ask questions. But I think again, contact Edmund.
I didn't intend it to be long, so
That's okay. That's fine. But I think ask Edmund if you're having an issue and see if you can get some advice from him. He might be able to talk to your architect and just find out what the issue is.
okay. It was a more general question because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's run into that.
I think it does take time for architects to get up to speed sometimes in a new building when they take it on. I think that's just at the nature of the beast. And I think once an architect gets to know a building very well, you will get, as it were, a sort of more detailed service. That's my experience myself with yeah.
Thank you for your time.
No, my pleasure, Alfred. Charles, quickly, if I may, ask you just not to be fairly brief.
I just want to go on and emphasize the point I made. The DAC makes decisions about approval of works and that sort of thing, which would include the names of the architects, the builders, and all that rest. I just feel that if that was accessible, if even not published, it would be a good thing. At the moment, it seems like your architect has to dig around to get the information. It seems to be kept on the quiet, and
Sorry,
that's
I'm
mostly
not
because of
sure. I'm not sure I understand what you said. The DAC don't make this. DAC recommend to the Chancellor projects that you put in. They don't appoint either the architect or the.
No, but they make a decision about whether the work is to be recommended.
Yes, they do.
And or not, which goes to the Chancellor, and the Chancellor approve
Yes.
the faculty. But when that's all done, all that information, if it was available publicly, it would allow all of us here to be able to access that if we've got a query or would like to find somebody else.
Okay. Thank you. Paul.
This is actually for Richard in Debenham. You might not have spotted, but we're having some electrical work done at Bredfield, and I'm offering to send you the name of our contractor who is very responsive. So if you direct message me using the box at the bottom which says chat, and then you choose me, which is Paul Cannard, I'll send you the details of our electrical contractor, who does come back with a quotation within a couple of weeks.
That's very helpful, Paul. Thank you. That's excellent. Okay, so I think Alfred may not mean his yellow hand up still, so I'm going to go to Sally.
Right, yes, I'm unmuted. I wondered if Pat had any update on the listed place of worship grant scheme and whether the VAT relief scheme is likely to continue past the end of March. I wondered if she had any update on that.
I don't. All that I know is that it was released in, I think it was end of October. And then it really depends on what works you're going to be doing. And obviously the place of worship needs to be, basically, it has to be a place of worship still. But then apart from that, I really don't know anymore, Sally, sorry.
Okay, I know it's due to, at the moment, it's due to end at the end of March 2025.
Yeah.
You haven't
Usually, yeah, sorry. So it usually is like that because it ends with their financial year. That's why.
There's been quite a lot of pushback trying to see if they'll continue it, but it's not clear yet. It will be a blow if it doesn't continue. There's no doubt.
Terrible.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is just an observation is that the sort of simpler repairs that, you know, were known as List A and List B are now, you have to go through the faculty system. You used to be able to fill in a nice simple form, and now you have to go onto the faculty. And I don't mind finding contractors, but I dread the faculty applications.
Well, list A's, you don't fill any forms in at all because
But this, you have to go into that faculty, don't you? I think
not for list A. No, for list
no,
A.
not for List A, no.
List B is just a form, but it is online now. Yes, you're right, Sally. Sally, we can't see your face, by the way.
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah. Is it Sally Wayman?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Now I see the top of your head.
Yes, sorry.
Right. List B is still only one side of A4, but it is on an online one side of A4. Yeah. But,
I know you still have to sort of fill in loads of extra information that you didn't have to do before.
Well, List B, the form for List B is not not a long form, Sally. It's the same form, but on a screen. That's all it is. So it's not a difference in length. It's just a difference of how you process it. But yeah, it is what it is, I'm afraid. Yeah.
For things like repairing a roof, you know, some fairly major repair, I take it that a faculty is compulsory, is it?
Well, I'm not going to give you a blanket answer to any question like that, Sally. Good try. But it depends. But yes, I mean, you know, major works will always be a faculty. Yeah.
Okay.
But you need to check with your archdeacon, who is not me. You need to check with your archdeacon what is required.
Okay.
And then do as he tells you to do, Sally.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Nice to talk to you. Yeah. Anybody else got any other questions?
But thank you. It was very I thought it was a very helpful talk, actually. Thank you.
I'd like to say on behalf of all of us, Pat, thank you very much. I found that really interesting and very helpful. And from the questions, it's quite clear that you provoked some thought and conversation. So can we just, on behalf of all of us, say thank you very much to you, and to all of you for joining us. Thank you very much. Round of applause.
Thank you so much.